Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Leonard Madu, and the topic is the visit of President Obama to Africa and why some of the countries are not exactly happy with not being selected as part of the recipients of this presidential visit. And Dr. Madu, let's continue and to talk about how this whole issue dealing with the refusal of so many African nations to deal with their people. I mean, how can that be resolved? That seems like an almost unending problem as far as we've discussed it on this particular show.
Well, the population of those countries have to deal with it themselves with some external support. Mm-hmm. In most cases, when the population feels empowered by some outside forces, then they can rise up against a regime they feel is oppressive. In the African context, while the population would like to see their leaderships in some of those countries where the leaders have been there for 20, 30 years or so removed, they lack the necessary leadership to accomplish that. In most of those countries, you barely have a middle class. Mm-hmm. And in most revolutions, the middle class is always the leader. Mm-hmm. The class that has some and wants more, and the class, that is educated, is the middle class. Now, what you have in Africa is the upper class and the lower class. Mm-hmm. The lower class is busy trying to sustain itself, trying to have 2-3 square meals a day than thinking of whom to overthrow. So that middle class that always ferments problems is lacking there. And that has been the policy of Clinton and Obama, is to build an African middle class. And that middle class has to be built and sustained by education. And one of the things most of the African leaders who came to power early, and even those who are in power now, is that most of them are not interested in building schools and having the population well educated. And you understand what that means. When a population starts getting very literate, then they start fighting for their rights because they know what it is. So what is happening in most African countries is that the population is not very literate to even understand what is happening. They still see corruption as stealing government money, not knowing that government is them, is their tax dollars. Okay, so these things are some of the things that a strong, educated middle class can see and decide that there has to be change. You don't have that middle class there now, that apart from probably South Africa, but other countries you don't have that. So it's a very big problem. So that has been, the result of lack of educational opportunities for most of the masses after those who came to power and now. So that has to be done. That's why the Obama administration and Clinton administration has been emphasizing the need for training of more Africans in jobs and every other thing as a way of creating a viable middle class that can be able to articulate the country's future. Now, secondly, the tribal makeup of a lot of those countries makes change very difficult, even though I know in the future it will change. For example, Obama is not going to Kenya. A lot of people are saying, well, why is he bypassing Kenya? Why is he not going over there? There are two reasons. Probably one is because of Uhuru Kenyatta, the current president, who is under indictment by the International Criminal Court, for those riots after the election a few years ago. So it will not be appropriate from
the president of the United States,
from the diplomatic point of view, for the president to be seen hugging him. And secondly, this is my hunch, is that Obama comes from an ethnic group in Kenya called the Luo. The Luos have always complained about the domination of the Kikuyu. Okay? Now, the Kikuyu have been in power for long, apart from Daniel Arap Moi, who is a Kalenjin. All presidents of Kenya have been Kikuyus. Kenyatta was Kikuyu. Kibaki, Kikuyu. Kenyatta, now Uhuru Kenyatta is Kikuyu. apart from Daniel Arap Moi, who is Kalenjin, Luos have never held the position of president, even though they have accomplished politicians who are good enough to hold it. First, you have Jaramogi Odinga, and then his son, current Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and Tom Mboya, who was assassinated. He was also a Luo. All of them were contestants for the presidency, but one way or the other, they managed to disappear. So the Luos are resentful. So if Obama visits Kenya now, the Luos might interpret it as empowering them, to start more political agitation.
He could create more problems than he can bring about help.
Within
the context of those rivalries between the ethnic groups.
And those rivalries and all this. Yeah, the population might feel that, he's empowering them to go out and keep agitating. You saw what happened when Wateya went to Poland. That's the former Pope John Paul II. His original name was Karol Wateya. So when he went to Poland, when Solidarity and their group were agitating against the military government of General Jaruzelski, after the Pope came, it empowered them to to start more trouble, and that led to the overthrow of Jaruzelski's regime. So Obama going to Kenya might empower the Luos to start making more problems, you see, because at times some of these African countries still feel as if they are protectorates. You know what I mean? So if Obama goes there now, the Luo community might think, fine, that's their protector. America is not the protector of the Luos in Kenya. And you know how an illiterate population can interpret things. The most educated ones will understand it has nothing to do with him being Luo. But the ordinary person on the street.
That's important to them.
Exactly.
If you see it from an ethnic perspective, it's going to be an ethnic perspective in spite of what the reality might be.
Exactly. That symbol alone, the symbolism of it, not the reality of it, can create problems around there. And it's not only in Kenya you have Luo-speaking people. You have the Acholis and all the rest, some of who are oppressed in their own countries, are also Luo-speaking in Uganda and South Sudan. So that might start creating a regional problem. The Luos might start thinking, well, we better get together now and do something about power in the various countries where we exist. So that's a very important, thinking there.
So, Dr. Madu, it seems that this is a never-ending ethnic struggle, and I think that in a real sense, it really grows out of colonialism in a real sense, because I think you've indicated that they've got different groups that are divided by boundaries and et cetera, and et cetera. You're going to have to give our audience more information in reference to that, because I think that, and not necessarily on this show, but I think that that's one of the things that we want to talk about in the future. For example, I think that a topic that sort of screams for some information is the Congo. What in the world is happening in the Congo in a real sense? Well,
the Democratic Republic of the Congo has been in chaos since the overthrow of President Mobutu. Apart from, despite Mobutu's corrupt practices, one of his legacies will be keeping the Congo together. Exactly, he accomplished that. So we got to give him some credit. After his overthrow by Kabila and his group, that chaos, returned to the Congo. And you remember Mobutu changed the name to Zaire, in order for people to forget about that name of the Congo. Exactly. So it's ironic that when he was overthrown, that name came back, and there's been chaos since then, like it was in the 1960s. See, so with all the riches of that country, it's now a kind of balkanized. You have Ugandans in some parts looting, the resources of the country. You have Rwanda in some parts looting. You have Angola in some parts. You have Zimbabwe in some parts, because all these groups supported Kabila in the fight against
Mobutu. Now they've separated and they're all trying to loot
exactly. Now they are trying to have their own separate enclaves to loot the country. And the central government in Kinshasa is not that strong enough, to defeat these different armies that have congregated in the country.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Gadu, we're going to have you back to continue this conversation, but I think that this is the kind of information that our audience ought to be aware of. And we want to encourage you to tune in again next week to another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Nashville Civil Rights Veterans Association, and we have two members of that association with us to talk about the development of the Nashville Civil Rights Association and some of the other ideas associated with the so-called sit-in movement. And of course, let us welcome you, Brother Lillard, and you, Professor McKissick, to the show this morning and tell you how delighted we are to have the two of you with us. Let's start off by having you, Leo, to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of your experiences. And then Professor McKissick, during this first segment, will give us some information dealing with her background, education, and then during that second segment, we'll get into some of the ideas in reference to your participation in the movement. Let's talk about it from that
Thank you,
perspective.
Dr. Haney, for having us on. The Nashville Civil Rights Veterans Association, very proud of you for maintaining this wonderful way to educate and communicate with the Nashville people. I'm a Nashvilleian. I went to Carter Lawrence High School, Middle School, and Cameron and Pearl High, and I went to attended TSU. It was called A&I, Tennessee A&I, in those days, 1957 to 1961, and graduated. During that time, of course, I was a member of Kelly Miller Smith's church. I was baptized in 1954 in Kelly Miller Smith's First Baptist Church up on 8th Avenue, the old building. And of course, he was the center of a lot of the movement in initial adult infrastructure, into adult organizations. So naturally, when it was known that we were preparing to demonstrate downtown to continue what Greensboro, North Carolina started, called a sit-in, I was extremely adamant about being part of that, being a Nashvilleian, being a part of Kelly's church. And we continued that sit-in the entire winter of 60 right on through 61.
How did you become involved? And I think, Professor McKissick, we've had you on an earlier show, and you talked about being raised in Detroit. And talk about how you became involved in the movement once you arrived here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and attended school in that city, and mostly went to white schools where I was in the minority, and was interested in attending an HBU, and somehow that led me to Nashville. And upon coming to Nashville, I did attend Tennessee A&I University, as Kwame stated. And I was living in the city. This was 1961 when I came, and had watched things about what was going on in the South, but really hadn't made the connections between myself and what it really meant to be black in America till I came to Nashville and really was confronted with adversity and saw Jim Crow firsthand. Not to say that the North did not have these problems, they were just not as you were just not openly conscious of many things that were going on, especially as a young teenager growing up in a middle-class family. But I lived in the cities, and when I came, it was right after the Freedom Rides had occurred and students had been expelled from school. And some of the Freedom Riders were coming around in the student union trying to recruit students to continue what they had started in the sit-in demonstrations in the city. And I volunteered and found myself in the midst of it, facing adversity for the first time in my life.
The great civil rights movement, in a real sense, the getting ready, trying to be prepared for the movement itself. When you think in terms of your involvement in that movement, what really motivated you over the last minute that we have during this segment?
Kelly Miller Smith's sermons on Sunday was basically saying, one motto was, how can you say you love Jesus who you've not seen, hate your brother who you see every day? And that resonated with me as a middle school kid when I was at Cameron. And he's constantly reminded us that faith means you act. You don't just pray, you act based on your faith. And that was his sermon. He was a social, active Christian. And that's what I heard from the pulpit at Kelly Miller Smith Church. And I believe basically that it was time for us to act. And so when it was clear that Jim Lawson was teaching nonviolence and teaching the tactics of Gandhi, it was our time to make a difference. It was we had to say, if not now, then when? If not us, then who?
Very good.
That was John Lewis.
And of course, let us take this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is the Nashville Civil Rights Association, Veterans Association, and we have with us Kwame Lillard and Professor Gloria McKissick from Tennessee State University, both participants in the civil rights movement. Professor McKissick, I think we left off with Professor Lillard talking about some of his experiences. Let's look at some of your first involvement with the civil rights movement. I mean, where did it start? It started at Tennessee State University, but when did you, for the first time, sit in at a place? How did you become involved in that?
Oh, the first time was at Wilson Quick, which was like a drugstore lunch counter establishment on Church Street. Again, we were recruited from the student union by Freedom Riders who were expelled from the university. Now the university recently recognized them, and they have their doctorate, honorary doctorate degrees, but at that time they were expelled students, and it was quite a controversy around that. But we went down to First Baptist Church for very brief training. Now, actually, the original people who were in the sit-ins got very extensive training. That's one thing about Nashville. Dr. King said that himself, that Nashville was the best, most well-trained, prepared city in the country for sit-in demonstrations. And of course, sit-ins is just sort of an umbrella term for just all kinds of nonviolent activities that can take place to put an end to injustice in the country. Actually, Dr. King identified more than 250 techniques that can be used in a nonviolent manner called Keynesian nonviolence, and the sit-ins is just one, but eventually students will be involved in sit-ins and stand-ins and walk-ins and just facing just any place, anything that was involved with segregation. And back then, everything from A to Z in the country was segregated, including the school for the blind. But anyway, they were well trained by Lawson and others at not only First Baptist Church, which Kwame was talking about, but Clark Memorial, I think, is where they really focus more than any other place on training those students and practicing for nonviolence. So when Greensboro took place and those students at North Carolina A&T demonstrated, and they called for Nashville to support, Nashville was well prepared to step up to the plate, and ended up actually being the first city to desegregate their lunch counters. So that's part of the uniqueness of Nashville in terms of the civil rights movement. Myself, however, I came after Lawson and others had left, and sort of picked up the wand or picked up the torch and tried to continue what those vanguards had started. So my training was very little, but they set the stage, and because they did it so well, and as far as we know, no one in Nashville ever struck back. I mean, they were totally nonviolent and committed to that philosophy. So we understood what it was that we were supposed to do. So I went down to First Baptist, and maybe they spent 10 or 15 minutes, and I got it. I understood. And we went down to Wilson Quick and went in the lunch counters there, and of course they refused to serve us and soaped up the windows, and in fact they even put on the window Congo in parade. You know, we were the Congo, we were jungle bunnies, you know, and we're just a group of students, you know, trying to do our best to change the world, change Nashville, change our lives. But anyway, they were dragged out one at a time and tossed on the streets. In fact, pictures of what I'm describing are on the Tennessee newspaper's website. They're doing a series right now on the civil rights movement, and they can pull up those those
Oh,
photos.
those images.
You know, and it's right there. But we were dragged out, and I was the last one dragged out and thrown on the street that day, my first demonstration. And that's when I got my commitment. And I knew from then on that this was something I really wanted to do. I didn't know for sure until I was thrown out on that street and felt the humiliation of the indignity of that.
You know, Kwame, if you look at some of the things that I think most folks understand about the movement itself, what can you tell young people today over the last couple of minutes that we have here? What can you tell the young people today about becoming involved in this fighting against injustices, whether it's the sit-in movement or whatever movement? Say something in reference to that.
I think they need to know the history of our country, that the country didn't just happen to get better. It just, no one woke up and waved a magic wand and allowed you to try on clothes at a shoe store. No store just decided to take down the policy and make people love each other. It took a lot of sacrifice from people who lost their education, lost their jobs, got beat up bad, spit on. It took a lot of young folks to take risks. A lot of these young folks came from towns first time in college. Mama scrubbing floors to get you in college, and yet you're downtown courting arrest, embarrassing your family, embarrassing your teachers. And nothing happens good unless you're willing to sacrifice. And you have to look in the mirror and say, am I the person to do that? And can I find somebody that's like-minded that I can trust, that we can have an agreement to continue until we see some results? You have to have patience. You have to have a sense of, there'll be people who will doubt you. There will be people who will say you're betraying your Christian faith. There'll be folks who call you communist. They'll call you an atheist. They'll call you all kind of names. They'll call you folks who don't love America. And if you can't take that, then you don't understand what change is about. Nothing good happens. As they say, the wide road is for fools. The narrow, hard road is for folks who are committed, who have a legacy to honor. We had so many people who have suffered in this town. It was time to change that. And you can't change hate with hate. You have to change hate with love. And that's something the kids need to learn about. Confrontations that always have to end up in a fight, a physical fight. Fighting with your mind and heart is a lot better.
Very good. And of course, we're going to take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Professor Gloria McKissick from Tennessee State University and Leo Lillard, who is the president of the African Association in Nashville, African Cultural Alliance in Nashville. And both have given us some information in reference to the civil rights movement in Nashville, especially the sit-in movement. Let's talk about the civil rights movement, the Nashville Civil Rights Movement, and how that came to be and what you're trying to do in reference to that movement, Professor McKissick.
Well, the organization is what I want to focus on that we represent is the Nashville Civil Rights Veterans Association. And we started in 2010, January the 15th, Martin Luther King Day, with a program at downtown Arcade, Woolworths, where it all started in Nashville back in 1960 with sit-ins. And Matthew Walker Jr. is our president. Kwame is vice president. I'm a board member. We have about 13 active members, and we encourage others to join our organization. Actually, the city is full of people who directly or indirectly were involved in the sit-ins. You didn't actually have to sit in to be involved, because there were community leaders, there were housewives, just ordinary people, you know, who
If you made
helped.
any kind of contribution that you think, then you could be a member of this organization. Is that what we're saying? Any kind of real contribution?
If you
running
were
food or-
involved,
yeah.
yes. Because like when the students were arrested in 1960s with that first sit-in downtown, the community raised $50,000. The students turned it down and chose, you know,
Jail, no bail.
to jail, you know, no bail, jail. But they raised money, they provided food, they just did they did telephone calling and so forth. The Easter boycott, you know, people were involved in the boycott, you know, which was the most powerful tool.
That clothing,
By the way, that hit the city economically. That boycott. You know, they always showed the people at the courthouse and Diane Nash, you know, asking the mayor that question: did he think that, you know, that the counter should be integrated? And he said yes, but it really wasn't that simple. It took, like Kwame said, all those people sacrificing. You know, it was a long road to get there, and it was hurting those merchants in their pocketbook. And that's why they desegregated those lunch counters. Okay, it wasn't just something that happened on the spur of the moment. Nothing happened on the spur of the moment. But anyway, we're an organization, and what we try to do is to reach out to the community. Our target is youth. We go into the schools, we will speak at programs, we carry young people on trips. We try to educate the public and let them know about our legacy, our past, hopefully so that they will understand the world they live in today better and can go on and continue to make changes, because there are a lot of things that still need to be done. I have a young friend that says, Gloria, when you gonna get off the bus? And I said, well, I guess I'll get off the bus when Jesus calls me, because it's not over yet. That's when I get off the bus. So, you know, we have new Jim Crowism. It's not over yet. And that's the main thing we're trying to do, is to keep the story, keep it alive, keep it real, and make sure that the truth is told, because a lot of people are putting out misinformation, and we try to correct that because we were there, and they're secondary to those events. But we are very active in the community. And one of the main focuses that we have now that Kwame may like to address is trying to get this city to put up a monument to commemorate and recognize the struggles that people went through. Some people went on to national acclaim, like John Lewis and Bevel and Marion Barry. They became mayors and Congress people. But a lot of people suffered. Some became, because of the movement, became alcoholics, committed suicide, have injuries and mental and physical things, you know, and people suffered. And this city, I'm gonna just say, it is shameful that we do not have something to commemorate that. We're known as the Music City. We ought to be known as the cradle of the civil rights movement, and we should have something to show for that. We've got the library, but you gotta go in the library to know that. They've got the new convention center there. Why don't we have a place there where people can get up and have a walking tour of the downtown area that would end up at some significant tribute to those that have suffered.
Now, that has happened around a large number of cities,
Yes.
has it not?
Yes.
Almost every city
Cities
except,
that-
Yeah.
almost every
except-
city except Nashville.
Let's, during these last few minutes, let's talk about the Civil Rights Monument, and let's talk about it within the context of you being involved in the Soldiers Monument, the Nashville 1864 Battle of Nashville, and et cetera, and all of the work that you and others did in reference to bringing that forth, and perhaps we might be able to use that as an example of what could be done in the, with the Civil Rights Monument as such.
Well, in 1979, we started paying tribute to the black men who fought right here in Nashville during the Civil War battle, 1864. After about 20 years, we realized there was no monument to those men who gave their lives, their last full measure, as Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, right? We raised $85,000 over a 5-year period, and we erected the only life-size bronze statue of a black soldier in America. We put that in the National Military Cemetery right now on Gallatin Road. Now, it took a lot of people. It took veterans. It took a lot of white congregations. It took a lot of historians, Boy Scouts, to raise that money. But that statue is there forever to give testimony that we helped build this nation with our blood. That's the kind of attributes I think Nashville should be proud of. They have the only statue. Same thing with the civil rights. Every city has a major monument. We just got back from a trip with 20 kids to Birmingham and Montgomery, 2 days. They saw at least 7 different examples of how those cities pay tribute to the people from those cities who made America better. You would think Nashville, being the best movement in the country, would have a groundswell of support. Put at least $700,000 in a major monument. Say, this is Nashville's contribution to the country. Music City is fine, but why not pay tribute to the fact that we were Movement City along with Music City? And that's what we're wanting Nashville to do. We shouldn't have to beg people to do that. The Chamber of Commerce ought to say, we want to put Nashville on the map, like Birmingham, Montgomery. Because we did things that nobody did. And that should be something you target for tourist attractions. That are folks to come here just to see the monument that Nashville should have had.
Very good. And of course, we've just about ended this show for today. Have you got any additional statements, Professor McKissick, to make in reference to the photographs that you have, or how people might have access to some of the information that you have there?
Well, these photos, probably we'll see them soon in the newspaper, but this, like Kwame said, was just a group of children that we carried. Not only have we carried them to cities with monuments, but we've also carried them to Clinton, Tennessee, and other significant places that have to do with the civil rights movement. And we just hope that Nashville sees the importance not only of the movement, the civil rights movement, the Nashville significance to the movement, but will get on board with us and help to make this possible. This is important to our youth because they just don't know, and it's our responsibility as their elders, as their parents, and as a community to inform these young people. And the rest of the nation.
And both of you believe that such a monument would be an added attraction in a real sense to draw people to this great Nashville that we're all looking forward to, especially with the addition of the new convention center and et cetera. All of those things would be important and playing into what the two of you are talking about. Is that what we're saying here today?
Absolutely.
Very good. And of course, let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is capital punishment in Tennessee, and we're fortunate to have with us Pastor Kay Walker, Ndume Olo